Hello there, this is Marlene Dinarius here from Mi Fa Tota Musica, which is part of Latinum, and you can find Latinum at Patreon if you like what I'm doing here and you want to support the work, and that gives you access to Latin stuff as well, if that interests you. So we're talking about transposition of the scale here and the difficulties this causes, especially if you're using the fixed dose system. I don't believe that this problem really exists if we use the English system or the Neapolitan system. In other words, the original system that was developed by Guido. Let's have a look at what Artemis Nixon Johnson has to say here, and I'll talk to you a little bit about him by the by as we go through. Remarks on the transposition of the scale. What he says here is called in chapter 14 the 7 different ways of reading the notes. In other American singing books, is called the transposition of the scale. This transposition of the scale has always been the great bugbear of American singing schools, and indeed it remains the big obstacle to most students of music to this day, simply because of the abandonment of the Solfeggio method developed by Guido, which then ends up creating all kinds of difficulties, which we will discuss. The different tables and diagrams, continues Artemis Nixon Johnson, which have been printed in singing books to illustrate it, the different machines and apparatus which have been devised to explain it, and the different philosophical essays which have been published to throw light upon it, would stock a good-sized museum. And I think that this is even more so the case now. The internet is full of videos about how to do this, but actually you don't need to know how to do it at all. You just have to know ut, re, mi, fa, sol, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And that's all you need to know. It has been such an object of dread and mystery in a singing school course. You can blame the French for that when their fixed dose system, that it puts one who thoroughly understands it in mind of the boy who dared not go after the cows because he saw 100 black bears in a lot which he must pass to get to the pasture. On thorough investigation, the 100 black bears turned out to be one black stump. On thorough investigation, this transposition of the scale will be similarly shorn of its difficulties. Let us make such an investigation. And now what I'm going to say here is that we can make it even easier by sticking to the system developed by Guido. Guido's system was developed to make it very easy for people to sing, for choirs to sing, for choirs to transpose, for organists to transpose, because back in the day organists had to do it. If you had a singer whose vocal range was of a certain type, then you just had to change the scale. Just bang right there in the middle of the piece of music to adjust to the requirements of that particular singer, who could only reach a certain high note and a certain low note. So irrespective of what was written in front of you on the page, you had to be able to transpose. And this was a skill that was expected of organists and expected of harpsichordists and accompanists in general, and of course of choir masters and choir mistresses and choir persons, whatever you want to call them. So, to begin with, to continue the last paragraph here, the remark should be made that those who wrote American singing books 50 years ago, and this was written in the late 1800s, so we're talking about the early 1800s, but not much has changed in the time since, did not have so clear a conception of the real principles of music as the older children of the present day who attend public schools where music is one of the studies. This transposition of the scale subject originated with them, and for some unknown reason, all subsequent America singing book writers have taken the same view of it that was taken in those days of musical ignorance. Those old writers made two great errors, and I think these errors have continued to this day in their treatment of the subject, and all subsequent American singing book writers have made the same two errors. These errors are, first, and this remains the case to now, they thought no one could read the notes in the 7 different ways unless they knew why there were 7 different ways. And second, they thought that all that was needful to enable one to read the notes readily in all of the keys was to understand why there were 7 different keys. And this remains the case in musical education, especially theory. The intellectual understanding of something does not give you the practical ability in it. And the musicians, and Artemis Nixon Johnson continues on the pre-modern tradition of practical musicianship. In other words, what matters? Your ability. It doesn't matter if you really understand the theory. If you can sit down and play, if you can play ad libitum, if you can play at will out of your head, this is the goal. Not that you understand all the theory. You can understand all the theory and not be able to play. Just like somebody who knows an enormous amount of grammar but can't go to a restaurant and ask for a coffee in whatever language they're studying. So as he notes here, both of these ideas are wholly erroneous. And I would concur. People learn to read books and newspapers without knowing why the letters A, B, C are made the shapes that they are. They can just as easily learn to read music without knowing why it is written in the way it is. They can read both newspapers and music the moment they know what the printed characters mean. It is not of the slightest consequence that they should know why they have such a meaning. When a person begins to learn to read music, he is of the same condition with regard to reading music the one who does not know his alphabet is with regard to reading newspapers and books. And as an aside here, I'm going to continue using he. And if you are somebody that thinks that he is she and she is he and so on and so forth, then it doesn't matter if I use he, because he can be she and she can be he as you please. Right? Or not. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just going to stick with the historical text that I have in front of me. So when a person begins to learn to read music, and here Artemis Nixon Johnson is quite clear, when a person of any gender, and so we're quite clear that we're talking about anybody here, and this is just a grammatical he. But these things need to be said in this day and age. When a person begins to read music, he is in the same condition with regard to reading music that one who does not know his alphabet is with regard to reading newspapers and books. What common school teacher would ever think of teaching music one who does not know the alphabet about verbs and nouns and adjectives in order that that person may be able to read? In other words, it's absurd. You don't need the theory to be able to do it. Everybody knows that he teaches him to read long before anything is said about these verbs, etc. He teaches him about the verbs and nouns and adjectives, etc. when he is learning to write compositions and letters, etc., not when he is beginning to read. The subject of the transposition of the scale belongs to the art of writing music. It does not belong to the art of reading music. Before anyone could fully understand the art of writing music, he would have to study something called thorough bass and a study called harmony for an hour or two a day for not less than 3 years. No one thoroughly understands the subject of the transposition of the scale who does not thoroughly understand thorough bass and harmony. And of course, thorough bass and harmony formed the basis of the way Bach taught his students, the way Mozart taught his students, and the way that Beethoven taught his students. And Beethoven even went and did special studies in thorough bass and wrote lots of notes about it. So, if anyone who does not understand thorough bass and harmony thinks he understands the subject of the transposition of the scale, he is mistaken. And part of this course will be the study of this thorough bass in a thorough way. There are so many things to learn, but we will slowly get through them one at a time until we get where we have to go. It is not possible for anyone to thoroughly understand it unless he has thoroughly learned thorough bass and harmony, or as they would have said back in the 16th century, harmony. But we're not there. We are in more modern times here with Artemis Nixon Johnson. It is not necessary, he writes, to understand the subject of the transposition of the scale in order to learn to read music. Indeed, all you need to know, and as Guido said, you need to know the hexachords. And you need to know the compound scale of the hexachord ut, re, mi, fa, sol, re, mi, fa, sol, la sol, fa, mi, re, ut. But you don't have to know the theory behind it. To read music well, the singer must know that sometimes the added line below means that one thing must be sung, and sometimes the space below means that one must be sung. And sometimes the first line means that one must be sung, and sometimes the first space means that one must be sung, and sometimes the second line means that one must be sung, and sometimes the second space means that one must be sung. And sometimes the third line means that one must be sung. It is not necessary that he should know anything more about it. If anyone wishes to know more, he must study thorough bass and harmony. But more knowledge about it than this will do him no good in the art of reading music. The idea promulgated in the American singing books that it will is a great error, and most music teachers to this day fall into this great trap. And students study theory thinking it will help their practice. It does, but only if you study it very, very intensely and in a very practical way. Abstract theory does no good to anybody at all. The other great error, continues Artemis Nixon Johnson, is the impression that if a student can understand all about the transposition of the scale, he can read music readily in all the keys. This error can be illustrated as follows. If you had ever had knitting needles in your hands, look at a lady, or a gentleman for that matter, or a person who is a rapid knitter, and see how her fingers fly. And notice that she knits with the greatest rapidity with no apparent effort. Then, assuming that you don't know how to knit, of course, take the knitting needles in your hands and ask her to show you how to knit. In 2 or 3 minutes, she will impart to you all the knowledge of the subject that is needful to know how to knit. Basic knitting, this is. But after you understand it clearly, see if you can do it as she does. You will find that understanding how to do it is but an almost infinitesimal part of what is necessary to make you a good knitter. And once upon a time in a previous life, I studied stonemasonry, and it was the same thing. In the beginning, we had to draw a line, and we had to cut the stone to that line, and that's all we did for days and days and days and days and days, until finally you could control the chisel and cut a line. And in the end, we were told that the great stonemasons could cut to a line with an axe, standing upright, to a fraction of a millimeter's accuracy. But it takes years to get to that. Anyway, let's get back to this. So you will find, he says, that understanding how to do it is but an infinitesimal part of what is necessary to make you into a good knitter. And the same thing applies to music. Understanding all about music doesn't make you into a good musician. And some of the best musicians I know have very little theory, and some of them can't even read music, but they can play extremely well. You could acquire all the knowledge needful, continues Artemis Nixon Johnson, in 2 or 3 minutes. But you will have to make your fingers go through the maneuvers which produce a stitch over and over again, thousands of times, before you can knit as well as that lady can. True, continues Artemis Nixon Johnson, there are many branches of learning in which if you know how to do a thing, you can do it. In arithmetic, if you know how to do a sum, then you can do the sum. And so there are studies in which knowing how to do a thing implies the ability to do it. But neither music nor knitting belong to this class of studies, for learning how to do a thing in music conveys no ability to do it, any more than it does in knitting. The ability to do it can only be acquired by practicing the thing over and over again, and I will say over and over and over and over and over and over again, until the ability is acquired. It can take years of practicing the same things over and over, just as one would have to acquire the ability to knit. And so the idea promulgated in American singing books that understanding the transposition of the scale will impart the ability to read music in all the keys is a great error. However, continues Artemis Nixon Johnson, practicing tunes in each key over and over again, and I would add to that, memorizing the solfeggio for that tune so that you can shut your eyes and sing the solfeggio and play the tune, and do it with your eyes closed. So practicing tunes in each key over and over again until the learner becomes used to reading music in each key, as a knitter's fingers become used to making stitches, is the only possible way to acquire the ability to read music in the 7 different ways. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this series is providing a series of tunes. I'm going to use those given by Artemis Nixon Johnson as his tunes for learning some of the scales, and we'll go to other books for other tunes, and we will learn them. So I will create videos that enable you to study the solfeggio and then to practice the solfeggio until you know it. And then you will be able to read music in that key, and you will also be able to compose simple things in that key. This, continues Artemis Nixon Johnson, and the foregoing chapters impart all the knowledge of the 7 different ways of reading music which a singer needs in order to know how to read music in all of the ways. In order to acquire the ability to actually read music in all the 7 ways, let the class practice the following. So, what do we need to do? The class, says Artemis Nixon Johnson, are already used to reading music in the key of the added line below. The added line below is the 1 ledger line below the 5 lines, which is the note C, sol, fa, ut. So, in the tunes for constant repetition and practice, which we are going to be looking at, which need to be repeated ad nauseam, in other words, they need to be ad nauseum until they make you feel ill. Ad nauseum, there are 6 tunes in each of the other keys. And they commence with tune 6, da da da. Let's go on. Let the class practice all these tunes in the following manner. 1, tell the signature of the tune. 2, tell what key the tune is in. 3, read the notes of the tune. And 4, what we are going to be concentrating on, is to sing the tune with the Italian syllables over and over again many times. Many, many times, until you can do it with your eyes shut. And I'm not exaggerating here. You need to be able to do it with your eyes shut correctly with the syllables. And actually you'll find it easier to do with your eyes shut than with your eyes open. Strange that, but I think you'll find that when you do it, that this is actually the case. So, as soon as the class can sing these tunes easily and readily, they will have the ability to read music fluently in all the keys. So this is not only a solfeggio course, it's a reading music course. And we'll have all the knowledge about reading music in the 7 different ways that singers need. These tunes need not be practiced all at once, but can be practiced at different times while the class are studying the subsequent chapters. It is strongly recommended that the students shall not be required to think of anything but getting the right syllable while they are practicing these tunes. That is, they shall not be required to beat time or to attend to any other point than simply getting the right syllable for each note. And I'm going to be concentrating on that aspect when I do the following pieces in this course. We will not be concentrating on time and so on and so forth, simply on the solfeggio, on the syllables. And that's bringing us very close to the end of this episode. So here we have the introduction to the actual tunes as they are found in the textbook of Artemis Nixon Johnson, his singing school. And I'll read what he has to say. The practical ability to sing can only be acquired in the same way as the practical ability to knit, or the practical ability to do anything with readiness and ease. First, the learner must clearly understand how the thing ought to be done. After that, he must keep doing it over and over again until the ability to do it with ease and readiness is acquired. And this is where most students of music fall down flat, and I think this is why most students give up on music. And this is why there are an enormous number of beginners of music, but there are very few musicians. Because this stage is hard to get past, that you have to go really, really slowly in the beginning and master things thoroughly in the beginning. The following tunes, says Artemis Nixon Johnson, contain things which the learner must acquire the ability to do with ease before he can be a good reader of music, and they must be practiced over and over again with the Italian syllables at the different sessions of the school until the class can sing them with perfect ease and fluency. Now, we don't have a school. We are here on this virtual reality, but it will suffice. Now, what I will be doing is I will be going through the tune. I'll be giving it to you with the syllables, and then again without. And on the way, you will be learning how to read music and how to sing the syllables at the same time. The scale we're using is the one here, fa, re, mi, fa, sol, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and on the way down, la, sol, fa, mi, re, fa. And you'll see how this works when we apply it to our first tune. I hope you found that useful. If you like what I'm doing here, please do support me at Patreon, which you'll find under Latinum